Okay, we're going to get going. I'd like to welcome Shiva Zargar from Build Neutral out of Calgary, right? Calgary. Shiva's been a new collaborator with Fenestration Canada. She's now engaged with us on a project with NRC on looking at LCIs for fenestration. So she's going to share some knowledge about EPDs and PCRs and all of those good things around embodied carbon. So Shiva, please.
Thank you so much, Terry. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you to Terry and Adrian for having me. A little bit of introduction about me and Build Neutral before we dive into EPDs. I'm Dr. Shiva Zargar, co-founder and director of science and LCA, Life Cycle Assessment at Build Neutral. Build Neutral is an indigenous-owned, women-led research and sustainability firm. We are headquartered in Calgary, but we provide our services globally. We specialize in life cycle assessment, environmental product declarations, and critical review. I'm also an EPD verifier with CSA Group. Now, diving into EPDs. What is an environmental product declaration? A third-party verified document that reports the life cycle environmental impacts of your product or service. When you go to grocery, if you're especially on a special diet, you always look at the nutrition label of your products. Like, for example, you want to buy high-protein yogurt or high-protein milk. You see, okay, what's the amount of sugar, amount of carb, et cetera, in it. So EPDs are similar to those nutrition labels, but reporting us the environmental impacts of a product. For example, it says how much global warming potential product X has. Here we have calories in nutrition fact. On the EPDs, we have, for example, global warming potential. But what is important is that sometimes you want to know what's the amount of calorie per cup of yogurt, but some yogurt says, okay, this is the amount of calorie for the whole package, and the other yogurt says two-thirds of the cup, and the other has 1/3 of a cup. So when it comes to EPD, we say that's the functional unit. What's the unit of calculating the global warming potential or calorie for the product? So declared unit or functional unit, a new word maybe you learned, which we are going to talk about it later. So now, where EPDs are requested. This building, I noticed that there are LEED. So probably some of the products have EPDs, for example, this carpet. So in some of the certification, like LEED in North America, I think like they have BREEAM in UK, or any kind of like a green building certificates. There are some institutions or like big companies, they would like to have ESG report. They would like to have LEED targets. Again, they are the clients who are looking for EPDs. And then we have whole building life cycle assessment. So as part of that, we need EPDs or LCA for the products that they don't have EPDs. And then based on environmental claims and disclosure, Bill C-59, we might want EPDs as well, which I'm going to talk about that, and you see where EPD sits. So in the LEED, the new LEED version 5, it specifically just clearly mentions in here that for new construction, EPDs get how much point, and for core and shell, again, EPDs get how much points, and then I put a red, it says quantify the reduction of embodied carbon of major structure, enclosure, and hardscape materials. And then it says, results must be based on embodied carbon intensities of material as constructed. So again, EPDs are going to be really useful. Why? Because if you just use life cycle assessment or any other tools to report your embodied carbon, are your clients going to trust you if it's not verified? And then we have standards on embodied carbon in construction. I put sections in here. It says, include the following requirements in the procurement of construction services. Ensure that embodied carbon disclosure for structural materials are secured by the organization before project completion, and that they list the required information for each type of material, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So again, EPDs are useful. BSIL 59 require that in order to not do greenwashing, the environmental claims must follow internationally recognized methodologies. So we have so many purposes to develop EPDs. It's going to shift the market to lower impact products, provide verified and comparable facts, and it's going to drive continuous improvement for those who are interested in reducing their environmental impacts, support codes, claims, and supports everybody to make conscious decisions based on lower embodied carbon. For example, at the national level, we have this green procurement. So is your product greener? I have a project with BC government. They wanted to know what's the difference in global warming potential of different papers they are using. So if you are paying attention to papers, imagine how much they are paying attention to vegan materials like cement, concrete, windows. So if you have seen EPDs, all the first pages look like this. It has the name of the product, the name of the manufacturer, the name of the program operators, which we are going to talk about. Who are they in the world of EPDs? So why EPDs are perfect? Because Bill C-59 says it must be followed internationally recognized methodology. EPDs are based on ISO 14025. We also call them Type 3 environmental declarations. On top of that, for construction materials, we also have ISO 21930 in order to develop EPDs. Now, why I said for construction materials, because these EPDs are not only for construction materials, they are for everything. So like recently, one of my hobby became to see like what EPDs we have for what type of products, and I found out we have EPDs for ski boots right now. And if you go to international, like EPD International, search ski footwear, it's going to pop up. So we have EPDs for everything. And then we have 14020, again, ISO, that talks about environmental statements and program for products. So the backbone of these EPDs are life cycle assessment, which my PhD was on it. I have a PhD from UBC Vancouver about sustainable bioeconomy. Then I have 2 master's degrees again, one wasn't enough, about the same methodology, LCA. So it's the scientific methodology, which is also based on ISO standard 14040, 14044. And it has 4 phases. It has goal and scope definition. What's the goal of doing a LCA for your frame? For example, what's the scope of it? Then we have inventory analysis. So are you developing life cycle assessment based on 1 square meter of the entire window? So how much hardware goes into it? What's the type of glass? So we need to clarify all the goal and scope at definition. And then based on that, we are gathering all the inputs and outputs goes to your system. Like how much silica, how much, for example, steel, how much aluminum, how long it took to transport those raw materials to your manufacturer. And then we transfer all those inputs, outputs that we call them life cycle inventory into impact assessments, which are the potential impacts. And then at the end, we have life cycle interpretation, interpreting the result based on the goal and scope, based on the assumptions, based on the limitations, what the quality of your data. If we didn't have access to all the data, are we using secondary data? From where? So these are all have to go into the report because this is a model, right? And the more you are transparent when you are modeling, the better. So life cycle assessment. We have cradle to gate, cradle to grave. We call them like system boundary. Again, at the goal and scope phase of your LCA, you should mention what is the boundary of your study. Are you reporting the global warming potential of your 1 square meter window manufactured in Winnipeg? Because the emissions might be different if you manufacture it in Calgary, right? From cradle to gate, meaning that you are not considering what you are going to do when the end of life of your window come up. Because if that was the case, your system boundary was cradle to grave, which considers the use stage, the energy, how many time replacement you are going to do for your window over the cycle of a building, if we are considering like 60 years or 75 years, depending on like the building life cycle, this stuff. Again, each phase of life cycle assessment has ISO. Like 14041 focuses on goal and scope and inventory. 42 focuses on life cycle impact assessment, and 43 on the interpretation. But how to create an EPD? In order to develop that, there are different parties involved. First, we need to find a program operators. Program operators are responsible for the entire EPD program. They are the one who develop PCR, product category rules. So why do we need PCRs? Going back to life cycle assessment is an ISO standard, great, but it's a general methodology to do LCA for any product. I can use life cycle assessment to develop, to find out what's the environmental impacts of, for example, these beverage, or the fungicide, or other biochemicals, or like my jackets. So it applies to anything. For cement, like you name it, anything you see in this building. But then product category rules comes in, tells me, okay, if your product is a window, the declared unit is 1 square meter. Instead of, for example, me developing life cycle assessment for 1 kilogram of my glass, right? So it gives us more a specific guideline. So when we develop EPDs for different manufacturers, it is comparable. What are the assumptions? What are the scenarios? What is the system boundary? Like life cycle assessment leaves our hand open. You are a great manufacturer, you feel responsible, you have like take back method for your recycling. So you wanna showcase your product and say, I wanna do life cycle assessment. Yes, this can be from cradle to grave. But then the current PCR for fenestration is only cradle to gate. So, and for developing EPDs, we have to follow PCRs. So this is program operator and PCR, we learned that. We go to program operator, for example, ASTM International or NSF, pick up the PCR suitable for your product, and as an LCA scientist, we develop the life cycle inventory, which is usually like 100 pages, and then we develop EPDs based on that, which is like 10 pages. That's what you see, because lots of the data are confidential. Let's go to the back report. And then we're good. We communicate with you. We got all your data we needed. It goes to the third party. That third party verified with program operators. They have all the science, all the knowledge about life cycle assessment, EPDs, PCR, the product categories and stuff. And then they are gonna review my work and say if it's good or not, why I did the assumptions I did, if I followed all the PCRs, everything. And then if everything is good, good. We can register and publish it. And then you will have a verified EPD. So these are some of the program operators. We have a smart EPD, we have NSF, UL, CSA group, ASTM International. I forgot to put it here, but there are many. And then we have product category rules. So here we have, I put, for example, for processed glass EPD requirements, or like NSF has PCR for fenestration assemblies, UL has building and construction, seal and EPD requirements, and then we have windows, door, and facade systems. So as you see, like, there are different PCRs. When you see EPDs out there, and if you are interested to comparing two different EPDs, the first thing you need to pay attention to see if they are following the same PCRs. Because these different PCRs from different program operators have different rules. Even each program operators have different general program operator rules. Some of them might let you to put lots of similar product in one EPD, some of them might not. Each of them have different pricing. So those are the discussions we can have when you want to develop EPDs. So as I said, we have EPDs for everything, for bag and luggage, for furniture, workspace products. These are like the PCRs. For biochar, if you have a product, the PCR is not out there, then you can like talk to associations or consult with us to see how we can develop the PCR first in order to develop EPDs based on that. And these PCRs have expiry date. Usually they expire in 5 years, but the program operators can say, okay, we are extending it for another year, or if it's in development, because there's always room for improvement or some changes. So this one of the PCR I was engaged. So when they are called for PCR development, they are called for like LCA scientists, for the stakeholders. So you're all, for example, Fenestration stakeholders. You should be in developing these PCRs because the amount of knowledge you can bring to develop these kind of rules in order to develop the EPDs are, massive, right? So I would highly recommend you to be engaged. So this was for powder coating. Then you can see Sherwin-Williams team were in that working group alongside me and other members like American Coating Associations and stuff. So in the PCRs, we define what is the product group, what is the system boundary, what is the declared unit. Here, the declared unit was 1 kilogram of powder coating produced per layer. And there were like so many more discussions when it comes like to powder coating, because like how many times, right? What's the basic layer? Like so much of those technical informations that people like you, a manufacturer, can bring to these groups. So why we need PCR? It's the ISO requirements based on ISO 14025. If you want to develop EPDs, we must have PCRs. And it gives us consistency in order to compare EPDs when they are based on the same PCR. Brings credibility and compliance and consistency. And when we are in those PCR working groups, we have to standardize functional unit, system boundary and modules, data sources and quality of our data. Are they like all has to be manufacturer like primary data, or if they don't, because probably you have some maybe ingredients coming to your system that maybe you don't know where exactly it is produced, because we need to know to calculate the transportation distance, right? Something like that. Or if we don't know, can we use like literature data? What's the allocation rules? Are you producing several products at the same time? How I'm allocating the electricity consumptions in your entire manufacture to each of the production line? Is it based on physical allocation, based on economic allocations? So the PCR is gonna tell us which we have to follow. Cutoff criteria. The cutoff criteria tells me if you have an ingredient that is, for example, let's say in this PCR, the cutoff criteria is 5%, and that ingredient is like 3% of your inventory or 3% of your impacts. Then there is, okay, if you don't have the data, it doesn't matter, don't include it. Something like that. These are all the modeling assumptions that goes into PCR. We have different EPDs. Some PCRs, for example, allow industry EPD, some doesn't. Again, PCR rules us. So we have industry-wide EPD. We collect all the data for all the manufacturer, and then we average them, for example, weighted average them, and then say, okay, this is the global warming potential of fenestration industry in Canada. Or we can have regional EPD. We can say, okay, in the Metro Vancouver area, all these manufacturers that exist, and they contributed to developing EPDs, the average global warming potential is X amount. Then we have product-specific EPDs. Let's assume you have two different manufacturer facilities. One of them is in Calgary, one of them is in Vancouver, and you are producing the exact same thing. So you give me your data for your product based on both. And then that's product specific. But then you have product and facility specific. You say, okay, all this data is for Calgary. Then that's the most accurate one, right? We have all the locations, everything. Perfect. So there are some information that must go into EPDs, like we have general information in it, manufacturer, product name, what's the PCR reference and version, because if it gets updated and the version number changes, then some rules has changed. What is the system boundary, cutoff rules, all these things that I mentioned in PCR goes to EPDs. And what methodology we have to follow as the LCA practitioner or scientist in order to develop it. So this is the life cycle stage. From the blue one on the left, you see the first one is extract the raw materials, module A1. And then we are transporting your silica, sand, etc., to the manufacturer. Are you transporting them all the way from China, or you're sourcing them from your neighboring province? So less transportation, less environmental impacts at that stage. And then you have manufacturing, like electricity, water use, like natural gas, whatever goes into your manufacturing system. And then we have to transport that product into the construction site. So for example, the project I had was for flooring, and they would say like 70% of our products are sold in Calgary and 30% in Vancouver. Then based on those data, we calculate the transportation for them. And then use, maintenance, repair, how many times we need to repair. So the dark blue one in the middle, B1 to B7, it's the maintenance and use stage for the time that PCR allows us to do cradle to grave. So if it's cradle to gate, we are stopping in the first light blue, A1 to A3, right? But then we are not considering replacement, which you can argue that, oh, the other framing company who is based on material A has lower embodied carbon because their product doesn't last as long as my product. But then my product has way higher embodied carbon, but your product might last all the 70 or 60 years of a life of a building. So that's why replacement matters, and system boundary matters. And then end of life, what you're doing with your product. Is it recyclable, like landfilling? All these have environmental impacts. So I just made up some numbers in here so you can see the impact of having a PCR that is cradle to grave, so you can include the use phase, including replacement. I assume that everything is the same, like extracting the material, transportation, like you name it, except the lifetime of your window. For a building that lasts 60 years, the blue window, I don't need to replace it. It lasts 60 years. But the yellow window, I have to replace it over every 30 years. So it's gonna increase the environmental impacts because I have to produce that window again, transport it again, install it again. And then at the end of it, I have to landfill, recycle it. So as you see, like, it shows the total environmental impacts over a full life of this building from your window can almost be double. So now here we are going to look at some EPDs and to see what they have. And if you are reading some EPDs are really important because some people put EPDs out there, but they just develop it themselves and it's not verified. And sometimes it's hard to distinguish because the look of it is the same as look of any other EPDs, right? You have to pay attention, does it have a program operator logo? Like here is ASTM International. Does it have a signature or a name of a verifier? Is it third-party verified or is it just internally reported? What PCR they are following? Like this one is following that NSF Fenestration assemblies. What products these EPD is covering? Like you see all these products they mentioned. You have to provide a description of the products you are providing in your EPD. What's the composition of your window? Like, for example, here they have PVC windows and they provide the composition based on the mass. For example, double glazing, like for the awning, casement, sliding, how much kilogram it is. And then all this system boundary I was talking about. What's the packaging? Like, what type of packaging you are using? Do you need packaging or not? Again, that's gonna come to the system and impact the entire emissions. Methodologies used, and the system boundaries, which is exactly the same as what the PCR requires. Like on the right, you see the PCR requirement. On the left is what EPD provides. And then they put all the system boundaries, different stages, like A1, which is the raw material extraction. They have PVC recovery and production of virgin PVC. And then production of glass, production of stainless steel. So you have to think about all the materials that comes to your system. And then how it's transported. Is it coming from China? So we have to do ocean transport, or coming from down US, like use a truck, or from other provinces in Canada, or using train, or what? So here's the transportation, and then all the manufacturing, which you know majority of what's happening in your manufacturer, what like equipments do you have, how much scrap rate you have, what's the percentage of your material that goes to waste, all of those. And then here they provide manufacturing the PVC window component, as well as transport of components to the assembly. Okay, now moving forward into the same EPD, you see they have lots of assumptions. So maybe as manufacturer, you won't use these, but like, for example, the architects or like interior designers or like all those engineers who would use these EPD to put it in the whole building LCA or to get LEED certificate, they might want to know what's the difference between this PVC window versus the other. Maybe after reading all those same PCR, blah, 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 then they look at the assumptions. If the numbers are too different, they will say, oh, okay, they come up with those global warming potential or acidification or eutrophication based on these assumptions. And then we have cutoff, we have allocation, we have data quality, all those items that are important, and I mentioned we discuss in PCRs. So these EPDs are following all the PCR requirements. And then they are reporting A1, which is raw material extraction, A2, A3. And as you see, it's not limited to global warming potential. Like 15 years ago, when I was learning life cycle assessment, I would like go to all these life cycle assessment conferences, they would tell us like, you should never like report only global warming potential, because this is a life cycle assessment, life cycle thinking. So you have to also think about water usage, the impact on the soil, like acidification, eutrophication, like all the other impacts you see, ozone depletion, because you don't want a burden shift. So EPDs are for manufacturer usually like just a report, right? But there are like, we use LCA for anything. Like some of the projects I have been engaged are at the research level, and they are producing these new innovative bioproducts. And they really want to reduce the environmental impacts of it, right? They use different chemicals for the pre-treatment stage of the wood in order to separate, like lignin, cellulose. And if it's like too high, they might say, okay, let me change that chemical in order to reduce the global warming potential. But that might increase another impact, like for example, acidification, your eutrophication, right? You don't want to do burden shifting. For example, right now in the majority of bathrooms, instead of like the towel, we have the hand dryer, right? So what's the impact? Like that uses electricity. That uses, like, for example, paper or pulp and stuff. So, fun fact, we have EPDs for those hand dryers as well. It's out there. But these are the things we need to think when we are producing something, when we are putting something out there, what we are doing, right? And yeah, here they say, like, what's the percentage of these frame and glazing global warming potential on these whole fenestration products. I said, like, the frame contributes almost 66% into the global warming potential, and the glazing contributes 34%. Okay, where to find EPDs? Now you got all excited about EPDs, you want to read some EPDs, you want to see like how people or manufacturer on the other part of the world is doing. Like Europe, they have so much EPDs, like compared to Canada, is like, and now they have all these carbon tax, CBAM, all these regulations. Is like, if we want it or not, these EPDs, this LCA, the carbon, embodied carbon, like they are here, they are coming to Canada. And in order to compete in a green market, in a low carbon market, like we need to put our hands on it. We have EPD International. So you go to their website, they have EPD library, then they have PCR library. You can see what PCRs are available, which of them are like valid. Invalid means like they are expired, etc. So for example, I put like vinyl floor, they had rigid vinyl flooring, they have so many. EPD International has so many. And then we have CSA group for Canada. Again, you can go to their EPD registry listings. We have EPD hub. So as you see, each of them has the different shape. Like this one gives us, what is the country of this EPD? What is the sector? What's the name of manufacturer? Published date. So when it comes to the world of these LCA and EPDs, there is still so much room to improve it. So all these EPDs were based on PDF, right? Some new companies, like startups, like I would say like 10 years ago, they came and digitalized these EPDs. But some of them are not getting updated regularly, you know. So there are lots of rooms to make these EPDs even better from the digital aspects for the people, like interior designer, architects, builders who want to use it, which I'm also in this side to make the life of the people who want to use EPD and LCA easier as well. And then we have a smart EPD library, ASTM, so you see published product category rules, and then in the same page when you come all the way down, they have a long list of all the EPDs they publish, and then you have to click on them to see what's the manufacturer, for example, expiry date, etc., to read the EPD. So today we learned some new words. Program operator. We learned about product category rules and the importance of them, because if we don't have them, we can't develop EPDs. And if your client comes and the only way they purchase your products is if you are having EPD, is to have PCRs. Because if your client wants to develop a building that is LEED certified, if you don't have EPDs, and if they want it, they have to go to another manufacturer, right, with EPDs. And then we learn about life cycle assessment, which is the backbone and science of those EPDs. You might look at the EPD, say, oh, I can't get enough information. It's short, it's 10 pages. But behind that, as I said, like we write 100 pages of report for the verifier to read it, to review it, to see what we have done to develop these models, where the data is coming from, all the background data we used, what background data we used. So much. And then we have independent verifier, which are accredited by the program operator. And then you publish EPD. You can use it for many different purposes, and these days, mainly we use for marketing purposes. And thank you for listening to me. I hope it was useful, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. So right now, the EPD is not a code requirement. Do you see that become a code requirement in the future?
Yes, it's supposed to be in the National Building Code in 2030. Says like we need to disclose the embodied carbon for exterior structure, which fenestration is part of the exterior structure. But as we were discussing, it depends on this project that we are gonna go together to see what data we can get and how the government is gonna put the numbers there, right?
Yeah, maybe so a little bit deeper on that. So for the 2025 code, they've added operational carbon as one of the requirements. So they've actually starting to kind of walk down that path. The idea is that they'll start including embodied carbon as a requirement, exteriors specifically. But the only way for them to be able to do that is to create the data necessary in order to back up actually adding it to the code. So that's some of the LCI work that we have set up with NRC. So the National Research Center reached out to Fenestration Canada to see if we'd be willing to work with them on creating a life cycle inventory project. So I kind of talked about it earlier, and this is very much the Build Neutral and Leighton Consulting are the two consultants we decided to go with as far as working on that LCI project. I'm expecting in June to get that started. But you know, our real goal here is to unpack some of the black boxes that are behind our products that knowing that Silex had gone through the LCA process, it's flawed. Like, no question, there's stuff about the PCR that I think from our point in the industry, we know is not quite right. So that's a lot of the work we're hoping to do is to go through and work with our manufacturers to collect information, and hopefully once we're done, we'll be able to very confidently say when you do your LCA, it will actually be reflective of the Canadian market. Because frankly, a lot of the anchors to that data is based off of US and European data. Like, we can't be making decisions on transport data based off of what the Europeans are doing. That's nonsense. So.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I have been sitting in some of the PCR developments. It's like a volunteering activity, right? And these PCR says like it's for North America. And then I saw like we were discussing the transportation, default transportation, because as I said, like if we don't have actual data, can we use secondary data or what? And that default transportation was based on EPA US. And I'm like, in Canada, it's wholly different. Maybe we should change this table to mention that this is only based on US, not for Canada. And I was the only Canadian in that PCR. That's why I'm like, if you see follow these program operators' LinkedIn pages, they always post. They say, okay, call for committees for PCR development. Right now, I'm like pedestrian bridges. So I have LCA expertise, right? But you are the one with all these manufacturing expertise that you should also come to this PCRs committee.
We'll talk about that after.
Yes.
I'm so down. We're ready. And please, anybody that's willing to jump on with us, like she said, that's actually really important for us, because that'll be one of my questions back, is like, it's kind of something that we're dealing with at the LCI level. What happens when there's not a PCR? Like, when we've got products that we're dealing with on like an LCI basis that there isn't a PCR that exists.
Yeah, like I can make assumptions based on literature, based on research, but again, we have that third-party independent verifier who might have a different totally opinion. But as long as we are having back for all of our data, is like this data is coming from this research, 2024. Because even if we choose like older research, they might like question us. Oh, why you are using that old? You must use new. So it's really important to have a PCR at guideline to develop this. Yeah.
But yeah.
We'll do our best.
as we work through this and the project that that FenCon is doing with Shiva and NRC, we have Canadian manufacturers today that have gone through the process and developed and gotten published EPDs. If the work that we do shines light on some of the problems in product category rules that were used, how difficult is it going to be for Canadian manufacturers to update what they have, or is it from scratch, you're starting all over again?
So no, so all those EPDs are expired anyway in 5 years. So some of them are out there is already expired, so they need to renew. So it depends on the program operator. They can say, because like their EPD is based on that PCR, right? Then we are updating, we are having maybe Canadian PCR, and then down the road, they have to update their EPD anyway, if they want to do it today or when their EPD expires. So that's my thought on it.
No,
Yeah.
we're kind of in the same boat on that. If it has to be redone every 5 years, then some of that information is just going to be in the renew. It just means their numbers might be very different when they come back to it.
So they expire in 5 years, so that obviously leads to the next question is, when you go to renew, again, are you starting from scratch?
No.
Or can you simply look at what you have and maybe edit and massage that data?
Yeah, for example, like I have all the LCA report of my clients, which is like all the data are coming from like all the questionnaires I send them. So if they come back to me again, so it's gonna be way easier. I'm gonna send out the required questions. If they say like, no, we didn't change this and that, we only changed this one, like my job is way easier. Like less work, I'm gonna charge them less because they already have everything, right? But again, they have to go through the verifier process.
I love to make things difficult. So they go to renew the EPD that they have. It's using product category rules, like you suggested, might be using data from US transportation. How much of that is easily updated when you go to renew?
Okay, they might not use it if they have a first-hand data, but if they didn't, probably, for example, if that PCR, these are all the assumptions, right? As long as the manufacturer give us the high-quality data, it's not hard. I'm just like updating in my model because I already built their model. I was like, okay, these are all your inputs, these are all your transport, and I'm just like changing it a little bit. Is, for example, if it's not truck, okay, is it ocean this time? So the first time is the harder because I have to build the entire model, but the updating it is get easier.
Right, okay. So obviously what I'm getting at is it too soon for window manufacturers to be doing this work, or should we be waiting for the work that's going to come out of this project with NRC?
I think we should work on it, but it's like a chicken and egg sometimes.
Yeah.
Because for Canada, we don't have any data right now. We just have, like, how many manufacturers?
There's maybe, well, there's actually more now than there was a year ago, right? That has changed, and I would say that's kind of something I'm watching is specifications and different general contractors and architects are starting to specify EPDs as requirements, and so not a code requirement yet, but we're starting to see market signals that they want to put it in. So there's some of that you'll lose the opportunity to participate at kind of early adopter levels with some of the projects, but it is one of the things I wanted to mention is that the LCI project is going to be gathering information from manufacturers. If you haven't already gone through your LCA process, this is going to be a nice opportunity to essentially leverage the fact that we already have to do the project and you can get your data in. You will have some of that data that you can bring back to an LCA consultant to do your own. So there is value in participating at that level.
Exactly.
So, I recommend anybody that is interested, and I've got a lot of good response so far. Yeah, I already sent out an email to the membership. There was probably 25 or so members that reached out and said, absolutely, we want to be involved. I'll be reaching back out to the membership again and then touching base specifically with those that were interested so that we can start collecting information. Again, June is kind of when I'm expecting to start the project, which really means August, September, October is when the things will actually start moving. But yeah, that's, I was going to make that comment that it's actually really important anybody that's interested to, if you haven't already reached out to me, do so. Another item that I kind of want to bring up, because the truth of this for me is at the A1 through A3 process, this is a good start. And I think anybody we've talked to kind of gets that. Like, this is the start of this conversation, because the truth is, if we're not dealing with B1 through B5, call it the durability and replacement of the windows, you're missing a giant chunk of that discussion. So, what I saw from the European market is that they've implemented this and done it well enough that it's actually created almost like a trade lever for them. I think there's actually some truth to the background that this is acting as essentially a barrier to entry when you've got country to country. If we don't do it, like if we don't participate in a meaningful way, we're going to wind up a bit of a dumping ground on this conversation if everybody else does it too. So it's the kind of thing where it's probably smart for us as an industry, from my point of view, to start moving down this path. It's not perfect, and that's kind of why the durability project that I talked about earlier was so important. Like, we need to get to a place that we can define that so that we go from, call it, a economic barrier to it actually does something for our industry. Because at this point, it's going to be a lot of like kind of getting your head wrapped around it and getting the metrics and getting it in part of your own corporation. But later on, I think we could actually do some things with this that make our products better. But
yeah. One more thing about that PCR, like different program operators function differently. In one of the program operators, they are developing a life cycle assessment for the product alongside developing PCR to see, because that product is so new, to see like what rules need to be in PCRs. So we are doing like A1 to A3, getting all the data, but we can move forward if one or two manufacturers are interested, giving us more data, be more engaged, to develop one life cycle assessment and to see, okay, what needs to really go into PCR.
Well, and maybe just another end to that is, we kind of talked about this at the CGC, so Shiva was good enough to present for us in Vancouver, and I asked the question there, and I'm gonna kind of like ask the question and then lean into the next portion of the question, which is, yeah, obviously there's different EPDs that could be done. And EPDs are a great way for you to essentially take this very complicated set of data and turn it into something ingestible. So from the industry side, we're not currently planning the EPD route on industry or regional. What would that do for the industry to have those EPDs? What's the value in going down that path?
So it's distracting the party. So one of the advantages of those EPDs is that they can show to their clients that they are engaged in this low carbon industry. They can show, okay, we were engaged because your logo is going to be in that EPD and it's going to be like an industry EPD. Mm-hmm. One of that. The second part is that like we can see what's the industry in Canada look like. And then if you are interested in developing your product-specific EPD, you can compare it to that industry EPD. Say like, okay, we are better than the industry, or like we are in the lower quarter of the industry EPD or something. Yeah, but the hard part as a person who has been doing lots of LCA is the data part, and the quality of the data. So when we get all those data sorted out, then the rest is easy. Easy for me.
Okay, we're good. Shiva, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Adrienne, can you do the last exhibitors?
All right, you guys ready? Tis time, tis time.
I was waiting for a long time since morning. I have the speech and everything ready. Let me see, give me a second.
I can start a short one.
No, wait.
There you go.
Hello everyone. My name is Erdem. I have been in Winnipeg back and forward with different companies. Now I'm representing a new company, Allumation. I sell machinery equipment now from Pertigi. Some of you may know the Pertigi, some better than not. So this is an Italian company. They are focused on the extrusion material, processing, fabrication centers, cutting, drilling. And then on the other side, on the aluminum, I also sell equipment for the panel fabrication as well. This is a new business. Canadian fabricators has been supporting me since the beginning when I moved to Canada. So I'm looking for your support. If any question, please come by, ask. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay.
Hello, good afternoon. This is Nadine and Edward with Comerling Canada. Comerling Canada has been around for, Comerling products have been around for about 2 decades. But since last year, we do direct business due to some changes with a former distribution company. Yeah, Comerling is known for UPVC products. Started manufacturing UPVC, I think, in the 1950s, and window and door profiles in the 1960s. Today, we also offer hybrid systems with aluminum and also aluminum systems. So just stop by. And if the products are not of interest for you, at least some German chocolate is here for you.
That's awesome. Thank you. I'm going to steal some German chocolate here in a bit.
Let's get ready to rumble. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maria Jasminez. I'm a market manager for Sherwin-Williams. With me is your local sales representative, John Nurse. And when I say local, he was born and raised in Manitoba, so you can't get more local than that. Today, we are here representing architectural coatings from Sherwin-Williams, whether it's residential, new construction. If you want to speak to somebody about some AMA specifications with regards to coatings, please stop by and see us. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria.
All right, thanks, Maria. Okay, we're going to take just a quick break, maybe 10 minutes or so, and then Jason's going to join us and talk about smart factories and automation. So about 10 minutes.